Peace, everyone, and welcome to another Friday night Bible study and another Rise Takeover brought to you from the Northeast area. My name is Miriam, and I am very excited for the topic we have for you guys tonight. But obviously, I cannot do this alone, so please let me introduce my panel to everyone. We have Naomi from the St. Louis branch. Hi, Naomi. How are you?
I am great. Very happy to be here tonight.
Beautiful. And we have coming from across the pond, Levi from the UK branch.
Peace. Thank you for having me. Pleasure
of,
as always.
of course. And we have coming at you from ATL. We have Deborah. Hi, Deborah. How you doing?
Yes, how are you?
Good. Thank you so much. So, as I said before, I am very excited to get into the topic tonight. As you can see by the title, the topic is Honor Thy Father and Thy Mother, Thy Mother and Thy Father. Um, I think as children in this nation or young adults in this nation, this topic is very prevalent to us and our upbringing. So I just wanted to use this time to kind of talk about our experiences with our parents growing up in this nation, how they taught us, and how they've influenced our lives to make us who we are. And then, as always, go back to the scriptures and see how. There were parents in the scriptures before, and how the God of Israel even parented our ancestors. So let's just get right into it. As we all know, um, one of the commandments that the God of Israel had for us was to honor thy father and thy mother so that our days are extended. And something that I think is really interesting about that scripture in particular is the fact that, as you see in the beginning of the Bible, people were living to 900 years old. But as Israel kept going against the God of Israel, as the family kept sinning and doing bad, um, now we live, the average age is like maybe like 70, 75. So I think it's really interesting how the God of Israel kept his word. He said, if you obey me, your days will be long and plentiful, but if you don't, then now we're here.
Yeah, and I think it's so wonderful how the God of Israel, like, there's no question about his roles and our responsibilities. It's so like there and clear and repetitive, like at the entire book that that he spells it out for us. Like these are your roles. So he has the roles of like woman and men and priesthood and maidens and all of that, and the roles of parents and children. Just spell it out so it's clear for everyone. Like there's no question about it, you know, like that relationship and how that's supposed to go. So I think it's very like wonderful as we kind of study the scripture and go through that it's very clear what you're supposed to do. Yeah.
Right, exactly. There's no need for interpretation or translation. It's very clear to see what the God of Israel expects from every single person and from every single role that you play in this nation. So, a question that I wanted to ask my panel is, what does it mean to honor thy mother and thy father?
Hmm. Hmm.
Kind of like, from
Godfrey.
what I read it as like, it's respect. And when I see the word like honor, it's kind of when you go outside, are you going to represent your parents in a good way or a bad way? It's kind of like, if you watch like Mulan, she's always talking about the honor of the family. Like you have to make sure when you go out, you have a certain presence. So when people look at you, they don't immediately think, oh, they're bad. Because like when you think about it, when kids or teens are like act out in school, it always traces back to their parenting at home, like what it's like there. So that's what I think about when I read that.
Definitely. I want to quickly jump in. I feel
Mhm.
as though with the word honor, is one of the few words in the English dictionary that isn't thrown around loosely. And I feel as though with the word honor, there is also a sense of authority being used, in the sense that I can have respect. The way I look at it, I can have respect for someone. I don't know, anybody. Let's name somebody hypothetically. Let's name Bob, right? Walking down the road. I can have all the respect for Bob down the road, but I may not have the honor towards him the same way I have the honor for my parents, because he's not an authority to me the way my parents are an authority to me. So I believe with the word honor specifically, or honoring thy father and thy mother, it means treating them, yes, adding to what Deborah said about having that respect for them and representing them in a good light, but mainly because they are our authority and we are a reflection of them the same way we are a reflection of our father. So I think there's a few ties you can make with that word honor, but I think it's a lot deeper than just respect.
Yeah, I agree. I think respect is kind of that baseline, but I think it also encompasses love and pride, like pride in your mother and father, pride to be a part of your mother and father's family, and that you are proud and have pride of like for them. And so I think pride is a lot in it, along with love and respect. I think it's definitely one of those things. I remember when I was younger, my mom always said, like, what is it? Like, don't shame me.
Yes.
Because I think parents know that their children are like branches of them. Like they go out into the world and the world sees not just the child, but the whole family. And so I think there goes that and like the outside perspective. But I think further than that, that inner perspective for that child is not even just when you go out, it's when you're by yourself, it's when you're with the family, like have that honor and pride and respect and love for the family.
Yeah, and I love the points that you all made. And as you were all talking, I was thinking about the fact that that's what the God of Israel expects from us. Like he expects us to hold the culture in a high regard and show off our culture and not shame him when it comes to, what we know, what we don't know, how we celebrate our holy days, how we show reverence to him, how we treat our brethren. Like those are all things that we can do to honor him. And by doing that, we're honoring our parents because they were the people who taught us to honor the God of Israel. And this is how you honor the God of Israel. And this is how you show that you're a good brethren, you're a good niece, nephew, you're a good cousin, things like that. And I love the point that you made, Deborah, about how when you see children and you see how they misbehave, you immediately think, okay, what are their parents doing at home? And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to have this conversation with you all, because I have been working a lot with children recently. And you see how some children are well behaved, they treat their peers right, they listen to their teachers, and then you see how other children are very aggressive, how they don't really listen to their teachers, how they want to do their own thing. And I've talked with the teachers that I've worked with a lot about why children act the ways they do. And they say a lot of it comes from their parents and how they discipline them, what their home life is like. And you don't really think about how big of an effect your parents have on you until people mention it to you or bring it up and they say, oh, why do you like act this way? And then you realize, oh, because my mom does that, or oh, because that's how my dad taught me to react or act um, in certain situations and instances. So it's really interesting, and it's really important to recognize the role that your parents play in who you become and who you are, because it's a massive role. So another question I wanted to ask all of you is, what does it mean to be a parent? Like, what does it mean to be a good parent, a bad parent? Like, what does parenting mean to you?
I would have to say, when you say like a bad parent, I don't think that's a parent then, because in order to be a parent, you're supposed to like teach your child You're supposed to show them things, grow up with them, and just parent them in the right way. A lot of people say a saying is like, every child deserves a parent, but not every parent deserves a child. So like really like putting, I don't know, I just feel like there's a different way to like, parent is such like a positive thing for children, and to say like you're a bad parent, I just don't think you're a parent at all, because that's not, you don't fit the you don't fit the,
Fit the bill.
yes, kind of like that for the teenagers and
Yeah. I agree. I 100% agree. I would add to that and say, I think it's really important for. Now, this is bearing in mind, this is coming from 4 individuals that haven't got children. We're not parents
Yeah.
yet. So it's very important to remember that we're going based off what we've experienced, right? But I think it's very important to remember as parents, or at least this is something I would hope to remember, and that is that our children, or that children in general, I was the same, I would imagine. My brothers were the same. I see how they are with me as the oldest. Children are very receptive, and they pick up on behaviors that they see around, that they grow up around. So there's a theory, a psychological theory. I just literally researched as we were talking here, and it's called the learned behavior theory. And what it is it's a psychological theory that focuses on how people learn through their interactions with the environment. So it goes back to your point that you were making earlier, Miriam, about at work, and you said you had a conversation with your colleague and you wanted to understand why children misbehave the way that they do, and the colleague pointed to their parents. It's because of how they are at home, and it's probably due to what they're picking up, the behaviors that they're picking up at home within that environment. So I think a good parent focuses on the environment that they surround their children around, or that they give their children as you know, again, children are really receptive. They pick up on the smallest of things, and before you know it, subconsciously they'll just act a certain way, and it will be due to the environment or due to their upbringings. So I definitely agree that a bad parent, they're going to find it very hard to call themselves a parent. They're not leading their children in the right way. But a good parent would definitely take into consideration the environment that they're given or putting around their children. 100% agree.
Yeah, I agree with both Jabor and Levi. I think the role of a parent is so important, and I think as children, analyzing the role is also important too, especially as we get older and think about how we transition from from a young person, adulthood, to being a parent as well. But I don't know what Levi said, something about like psychology and learning and development, that reminds me of I think it's a theory of nature versus nurture with psychology, that your baby, like this child, already comes with predisposed traits and notions and all these things that are like genetically or historically like passed down. But the other part of that, and there's like a debate about like what percentage is each, but the other part of that is only how that parent brings up that child. That's that nurture. That's that how they help to that child to develop. That's the environment they put them in, the words they say to them, if they allow them to watch TV all the time or read books. Like it's exactly that. So they have such a imprint and such a responsibility for another human being. That it's such a huge role. And so I think a parent, I'm not sure what verse it is, but there is honor thy father and thy mother. But there's another verse that also is like honor thy father and thy mother as a child, but as a parent, make sure to nurture your children.
Yeah. I was just about to touch on it, because I was going to jump in. I was waiting for you to finish, right?
Yeah.
And I think this is the verse. I think I've got the verse. Proverbs 22, verse 6. It says, train up a child in the way that they should go. Is that what you're talking about?
No, kind of. I think so.
Oh, okay. I was close enough. But that's essentially where I was waiting for you to go, because it sort of touches on that nature versus nurture anyway.
Yeah.
You need to nurture a child and build them up in a specific way.
Yeah.
So I guess if we're answering this question from an Israelite's perspective, making sure that child understands the value of who they are and their history and their traditions, and obviously understanding the value of the laws, the statutes, the commandments, and the power of the God that they serve, that is a good parent. That is a great parent. And every single one of the strongest Israelites in the book in which we read would have had parents like that, and would have had parents that had nurtured them to, in keeping the laws, the statutes, and the commandments, and being that strong Israelite.
Yeah, I definitely agree, and I'm glad that we're on the same page. Because it's so important. Like, if you honor the mother and the father, but there is also a responsibility and role of that mother and father. Like, they're not going to honor mother and father for leading on the wrong path. You know what I mean? And so there's just such a good I forgot what the scientific term is, but that relationship is like a give and take.
Yeah.
And so the parent's responsibility, like their role, is to put their child as number one, just as the God of Israel puts us as his number one, and to make sure that they know the law, statutes, and commandments, that they will hold it dear in their heart. And I think if a child is brought up and doesn't have that, doesn't have Israel in their heart and their own relationship with the God of Israel, that something went wrong. Like, they're supposed to grow up with that and maybe reared with that. So the responsibility and role of a parent is heavy. Like, it's really, really heavy, and it's a lot. It's a whole human being that you're.
And it's so crazy because the God of Israel, another thing that he was so clear in saying is that you have to pass down this doctrine from generation to generation. Like, don't just let it die with you, because how is that going to build a sustainable family, a sustainable nation, if you don't pass down the laws, the statutes, commandments, and the culture of Israel? And I think to the God of Israel, what being a parent is to nurture your child, to prepare them for the world by giving them the laws and giving them the stories and allowing them, like introducing them to their forefathers and their stories and how they could even apply that to their own lives. Because a lot of the time you go out and you see people, even people my own age, and it's just, they're so lost. But I'm so happy that I was able to come up in this family and this nation and have like this what's the word, this baseline of an understanding of who I am, and that my parents instilled that in me from as soon as I came out of the womb, even with being offered up, like having that culture instilled in me ever since I was in the womb, to know that I belong somewhere, I have a culture, I know the way I want to live my life, I understand that this is what I have to do. And like Levi said, obviously, none of us are parents, not even close to being a parent, but all the things that we have experienced through seeing our parents raise us, our aunts and uncles raise us, and our cousins, siblings, things like that. And like Naomi said, the role of a parent is a very heavy one, but if you do it right, then hopefully, your child will thank you and honor you through their actions and being part of the nation, part of this family.
Yeah, definitely. Can I quickly add?
Yeah.
Just to your point, right? Just to add to your point, and I think it goes back to that theory of learned behaviors, right? Because you're talking about the laws, the statutes, and the commandments being instilled in us, hence the reason why we're still here today. And I think it's super important to bring back that theory about learned behaviors, because it goes back to even our parents and the ways in which they lived. So, for example, I'll give you an example. With me and my brothers going to service, I'm talking about when we were younger, right? Because we're all grown up now. One's 18, one's 19, I'm 22. So I'm talking more so for the younger one now. The youngest one's 11, and then obviously how we were when we were younger. Our parents never gave us a choice when it came to going to service or when it came to keeping the new moon, the Sabbath. They never gave us a choice in doing those things because they knew what was best, and they were doing it. And we saw how seriously our parents took those things, and my brothers and sisters can relate. We all saw how seriously our parents took these things, and how seriously they took the laws, statutes, and the commandments, and keeping the services of the Lord, to the point now that we're at a grown age. Again, I'm 22, and I take that so seriously, and I know for a fact that when I do become a parent, we don't know when that's going to be. That will be the same thing. Like, I'll make sure that through my actions, I'm not just telling my children this is what we're supposed to do. They need to learn through actions. They need to see how seriously you take it, for them to actually understand the value in what you're doing, or in what you're trying to get across to them. So I think it's super important to remember we need to also, or the parent needs to also be the role model, and the physical evidence of physical example of what needs to be done. So,
Yeah, I definitely agree. Like the child's first role model, the child's first love, the child's first mentor, the child's first professor. Like the parent is the child's everything for the first few years of life. And so it's huge. Like I think about becoming a parent. I'm like, you know what? I can wait like a couple of years because like it's a lot because you have to be that person for that child, and it's not just it's being their mentor and the role model and showing them things like the importance of Sabbath and the importance of staying in touch with your brethren and the importance of like this culture, but they also have to explain these things to you because they have to understand it themselves, so they have to learn and teach at the same time, and so there's all these things that is like encapsulated in like this role that is just so important.
actions speak louder than words. I think ultimately that's what I was going to.
I
Personally.
think you also made a really good point, Levi, about, making sure like Israel was like a priority. Like we didn't have a choice when it was time to get up and go to services. And I think that's just such an important thing to do as a parent and as an Israelite parent, to really embed those Israelite rules into our childhood growing up, because you have to learn to like really have Israel a part of your life. And I feel like through parenting, that you have to make sure your parenting's right, so that when we grow up, we're still in the nation, we're still doing good, and we're still serving the God of Israel. Yeah, I think you made a really good point about that.
And one thing I love is that when you become a parent, it's not like you got it all figured out. Like, it's not like you find out you're about to be a parent and everything in your life goes smooth after that and you have the perfect example to show your children. But I think that something that's really important in parenting is showing your child that you're not perfect. There are things that you can't do, and also have that understanding with your child as well, to know that they're not going to be perfect and they're going to have their mess up moments, but it's what you do after that. It's how you bounce back after those things that really define you as a person, as a parent, as a child, as a team. And I just love how we have the community in Israel that we can always go back to, where our parents ask other parents in the nation, like, I'm not really sure how to do this. Can you help me figure this out? Or even us, and being children in the nation, we can talk to each other about our experiences and how we can have the same experiences even though we don't have the same parents, and we can relate to each other and have a sort of bond over the fact that we were raised in different ways but same ways at the same time, but we all still have that baseline understanding, and that Israel is what it is, and we need to do our part and our job to contribute to the lasting of the nation, being that we are the future generation of leaders and teachers and aunties and uncles that were the same for us. So one thing that I wanted to bring up with you guys is the different parenting styles and how they can have an effect on who your children become. So one thing that I've learned a lot in my psychology classes are obviously the effect that parenting and different parenting styles can have on children. The first one is the authoritative parent. This is kind of the most effective way of parenting. It has open communication, minimal judgment, structure, and routine, because this allows children to come up in healthy environments, and it has them have open communication with their parents and build strong relationships between a parent and a child. Um, the next one is the opposite. So it's not meeting the child's emotional needs at all. This is neglectful parenting. The child is left alone a lot. There's a lack of parental involvement. And this can lead to children struggling to develop relationships, making them withdrawn from relationships and unable to keep and maintain a healthy relationship, and not even understand or know what a healthy relationship is because of the way they were raised. Next, we have permissive parenting. which is this parenting style where parents let their children do whatever they want to do, be whoever they want to be, lets them get whatever they want, and doesn't want to be seen as a villain to their child. So they just let them get away with everything. This can cause a child to develop a lack of motivation, not want to do anything, not want to be told what to do, just want to do what they want to do when they want to do it, and that's it. And the last parenting style is the authoritarian parenting style, which means what I say goes, do not question it. You don't have any room to ask me why or tell me you don't want to do it because it's not going to happen. This is very strict parenting. I don't know if you guys have heard the saying, the strictest parents have the sneakiest children. I know that growing up, one of my best friends is actually a child of a pastor. So it's really interesting to see how she goes about her life and goes about the way she does certain things that her parents may or may not like for her to do, but she does it without them knowing because she knows that if they ever found out what she did, it wouldn't be good for her. And then there are other parenting styles that are like helicopter parenting, where you're always hovering over your child, trying to make sure they're not doing anything wrong, make sure they're always doing something right. Positive parenting, which is telling your child they're always doing the right thing and not really telling them when they're doing the wrong thing. Paranoid parenting is more so when you don't let your child go anywhere, you don't let them do anything because you're afraid of what may happen to them if they do anything. And then free range parenting is just giving your child the ability to do whatever they want, whenever they want, and being as hands off as you can be. So I want to ask the panel, what kind of parenting styles can you relate to the most? Is it like a mixture of some? Is it more of one than the other? I'd love to get your perspectives on this.
I think when I first read about this, I went straight to authoritative parenting, like, as what I've seen in both of my parents, because they were very like, um, they were openly communicative. Like I knew that I could tell my parents anything at any point, and I still do. There was definitely structure and routine, especially when I was homeschooled, and it was just a lot of that speaks to me. And then when I thought about it for a minute more, I thought about authoritarian parenting, because I remember there were moments where, like a strict set of rules without any question was there. And I don't know, it got me thinking about all these kind of styles of parenting. And I don't know, I feel like taking out like the negative kind of connotations with a lot of them. I think my parents kind of used all of them. I don't know, maybe they were able to look at the child, the situation, the time and the age and all of that and create like a parenting style that worked for that moment in time. So like for instance, I when I was probably really, really young, like a baby fresh out the womb to like a toddler age, it was probably a lot of authoritarian parenting because you're a child, you don't know anything. So let me like there are rules and you're gonna follow them.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I think it kind of transitioned to more of authoritative parenting as I got like middle school, and then even high school, kind of went back and forth between authoritative and authoritarian. But I feel like as I become a young adult, the parenting style just changed a lot. Like my parents can tell me, of course, what to do, but I don't always have to follow exactly what that is. And they give us the room for that because at this point, I mean, I'm 24 years old. At this point, they give us a lot of advice, but they can't tell us to go left or right. And that's, how they raised us, like to make our good decisions on our own as well. And so I think that the parenting styles kind of, web and flow through at least my childhood and the way that my parents raised me. So I think it's very interesting to study those and to kind of name those as well.
Right.
I kind of was gonna like say what Naomi was saying. My parents, I feel like when I was a lot younger, they were a little more stricter because as a kid you don't really know anything, so they have to kind of like lay down boundaries and rules. And then the older you get, the more you start to like understand, and if you ever had like a problem or just something that you maybe not agree with, you know, it's a little more open communication. And then of course helicopter, you know, and it comes through love, of course, because you just want to make sure that, you know, your child's okay, and like, oh, where are you going, who are you going with? And it slowly starts to be less heavy as you get older because you've done it so many times, you know, they trust you, you've already laid down the ground rules, all of that.
Agreed. Was you gonna jump in, Miriam?
No, go ahead.
Agreed. And I think there's a common consensus here that a lot of like when we were younger, really young, authoritarian parenting was probably the parenting style that was used. I would say that definitely happened with me and my brothers. But again, along the similar lines that Naomi mentioned about wanting to take away the negative connotations attached to it, because I would also say that even the relationship with the children of Israel and our father was of that sort of ilk. But you need to take away the negative connotations from it. So what I mean by that is, with my parents, I would say that was definitely the parenting style they used. But I remember my parents used to always say to me, "You'll see when you grow up. You'll see when you grow up." Like, for example, we used to have chores and we used to have this and that and 20. Yeah, right. But they're always like, "You'll see when you grow up. You'll see when you grow up." And I think a lot of the skills in which we learned during that time period, me and my brothers, we used to this day. And obviously, as time grew and time carried on or went on, authoritative parenting became the way in which, or is the way in which my parents are, looking over us now. Open communication, minimal judgment. I think that is the case with me and my parents. Similar to what Naomi said, I can go to my parents about anything. Whether I do or not is a complete different question, but I can go to them about anything I want. And they tend to, I think they've built that trust with me and my brothers, to know that we're not stupid enough to go and do, craziness outside. And, they give us that freedom. As long as we respect their boundaries, they give us that freedom. And I think that's super, super important. So I think there's a common consensus there.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that with me, it was mostly authoritarian when I was growing up. And then as I got older, like everyone has said, it turned more into authoritative, because I think at that point, at a certain point in your life, your parent starts to trust the way that they raised you and trust you as well to know that, okay, I've given my child enough to know that hopefully they're not going to do anything silly or stupid. And if they do, they'll know how to handle it because I gave them the tools to do so. And if they still don't know how to, hopefully I've given them the kind of environment where they can come to me and tell me that they need my help or that they just need a little advice when it comes to a certain situation they may be going through. A lot of the time now I'm seeing that younger parents are doing a lot of permissive parenting, at least in the classroom that I worked in. It's a bunch of 4- and 5-year-olds. And I talk to the teachers and they say that their parents don't want to be villains to their children. And that got me thinking that they probably grew up in households that were very strict, authoritarian, and they wanted to do the complete opposite of that. But you can see how that may not have the best influence on the child because now they don't want to listen to authority. Now they only want to do things when they want to do it. And they have trouble, forming relationships with other children that have different styles and who are different people because of the way that their parents raised them. So I think it's really interesting to look at these parenting styles and also look at the God of Israel's parenting style, like you had mentioned, Levi. And I think that with him, it's very much authoritarian. But also we can't, discount the fact that he does want to reason with us. He does want to talk to us about, why we're doing the wrong things we're doing, and how to, is it him? Like, is he the problem? Like, try to come up with a solution to figure out ways that us and the God of Israel can live in harmony without us, constantly going against his wishes, sinning, uh, following other nations, things of that nature. And I think the scriptures are a great way to look at how the God of Israel parents us, but also how our forefathers parented their children, and the relationships between our forefathers and their children.
Yeah. I just wanted to say that when thinking about the different parenting style, if God of Israel is our father and us as one is the child, that I do see authoritarian. I see somewhere between authoritative and authoritarian. I think, like you said, there is still that open communication. I think the God of Israel has been the most communicative parent ever. Like, he's exactly what he needs, exactly what he wants from us, and exactly what will happen if that doesn't happen. Like, from the very beginning, like that's always been there. And there's definitely structure and routine, but of course there is like very, very like there's a lot of punishment involved, and there's a lot of like obedience versus disobedience, and there's a lot there. Even sometimes there's no like, yeah, don't say anything, just follow. You know what I mean? So I think there's like different. I don't know the percentages, but I think it's some of it, authoritative and authoritarian, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree. I definitely think that he falls in between those two, but most of the time
Yeah.
it's authoritarian because we just do not know how to follow his instructions all the time, because the entire Bible is just full of stories of us just not doing what we were supposed to do. But like we said, there are those few moments where, the God of Israel actually talks to us one on one and says, hey, like, how do we fix this? How do we make this better? Like, how can we work together to, do what we need to do?
I think a good example of that is Exodus 32, where it speaks about Moses. I think it's 32, where he reasons with the God of Israel.
Yeah.
And that's a clear example of the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob's relationship with Moses, and the fact that Moses was able to again reason with our father, because our father was understandably angry. He was annoyed. He was understandably annoyed and understandably angry, but he's allowed that open dialogue to be kept between him and Moses, and therefore, what he wanted to do, he didn't do. And I think that's a clear example of authoritative parenting. Is that the right term?
Yeah.
I think that's an example in itself, personally.
I was gonna say the exact same thing. Like, you literally just like
Great minds think
I was
alike.
gonna mention the exact same thing.
Yes, but even, through Moses, we see that the God of Israel had a relationship with Moses and Moses was able to talk the God of Israel down from destroying all of Israel again and said, like, let's try to work with them. Let's try to, figure this out. And even when Moses went down and saw what they were doing, he was like, what is happening? Like, why are you doing this? I don't understand. So he kind of understood like why the God of Israel felt the way he did, but he was also like, I feel like we can still work with them. And he ended up finding good ones like a Joshua and like a Caleb that, were able to follow the law, statutes, and commandments, even though it wasn't, the multitude of Israel at that time. So I think now we are going to jump into the scriptures and look at examples of how the God of Israel parents his children. So we're going to go first to Genesis 3. Can I have a reader?
I can.
Okay.
Just stop me where you want me to stop.
Go right ahead.
I'll go. All right. So it states, now the serpent was more subtle than any beast of the field which the Lord God had made. And he said unto the woman, yea, hath God said, you should not eat of every tree of the garden? And the woman said unto the serpent, We may eat of the fruit of the trees of the garden, but of the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, God has said, You shall not eat of it, neither should you touch it, lest you die. And the serpent said unto the woman, You surely shall not die, for God doth know that in the day you eat thereof, then your eyes shall be opened, and ye shall be as gods, knowing good and evil. And when the woman saw the tree was good for food, and that it was pleasant to the eye, and and a tree to be desired to make one wise, she took of the fruit thereof, and did eat, and gave also unto her husband with her, and he did eat. And the eyes of them both were opened, and they knew that they were naked, and they sewed fig trees together, and made themselves aprons. And they heard the voice of the Lord God walking in the garden in the cool of the day. And Adam and his wife hid themselves from the presence of the Lord God amongst the trees of the garden.
So we see here that Eve knew good and well what they were supposed to do and what they were not supposed to do. She even says, we may eat of the fruit of the trees in the garden, but of the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, God hath said, Ye shall not eat of it, neither shall ye touch it, lest ye die. So this is one of those examples where it's like, I know that my parents told me I shouldn't do this, but like, what's the worst that could happen? Like, like what could possibly happen? And then we see after this, the God of Israel goes into his authoritarian parenting, and he's like, you know what? I'm going to punish you because you did exactly what I told you not to do. And now with Eve, we know like childbirth is a painful experience, and that has gone through every single woman of all time after that. That wasn't just a punishment for Eve. And that shows that not only can the sins that you make and the sins that you do have an effect on yourself, but it could affect future generations. So you have to be mindful of what you do and how you go against the God of Israel, your parents, and how that can not only affect you, but the future generations of this nation.
And there's always a reason to everything. Sometimes, like when we're younger, like our parents will tell us things and we don't quite understand why they're telling us these things or what it means. And sometimes we ask questions, but sometimes you kind of just have to do it because they know more than you. And you just kind of have to like trust them in a way, as you can see in a result of what happened with Adam and Eve. Yeah, I just think that's a very important factor that is taken into like being a child and having to listen to your parents.
Definitely. I think it's like another I told you so moment.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like again, Eve was clearly instructed to not do what she done. And she dismissed it, and she done exactly what she wasn't supposed to behind our father's back. And the punishments that came after due to her actions. It was like another, again, I told you so moment, which happens to everybody, unfortunately. That happens to her there.
I think it also, I think, as Miriam was saying, that it points to, because her actions had consequences that reach down even to now. I don't know how much time has passed, but it's thousands and thousands of years. And so, I mean, that just speaks to the promises and the sins and the actions of our parents does seep down to the children. Like, that is real. And so that's like super real. And like, it's just really, again, it's really heavy as a parent and a person to do that, because you are eventually responsible for another person. And so this is like one of those, it like speaks like the disobedience and like the importance of obeying. And sometimes as a child, like not asking any questions and basically just obeying. So I think, I don't know, it's just super important lesson to learn, because we have no idea what was planned for us if this didn't happen. Like the world could have been different, and now plans have to change.
Right, and we will never know what greatness could have been in store for us if they had done the right thing. Like, we will never know, but It was probably so amazing. But I think that that's a great point, because when you're a parent, you may not really think about what you can do can affect your child, even when you're a child. Like us now and the things we do now could have maybe not an impact on us or our immediate children, but our grandchildren and great grandchildren can reap or not reap it, but like reap our sins and the consequences for our sins, without us even knowing. So that's kind of how you have to live your life for your parents and for your God, but also for future generations, because you want to make sure that they'll be okay and not affected by what you did or didn't do during your lifetime.
Very good point.
Yeah, so another example that I wanted to bring up about the relationship between the God of Israel and us is Abraham. I think that he is a great example of someone who was a friend to the God of Israel while being the God of Israel's child, and them having that communication with each other, and the God of Israel understanding who Abraham was as a person, and Abraham understanding the power and the might of the God of Israel at the same time. So here we have Genesis 22, and I'll read this one. And it came to pass after these things that God did tempt Abraham and said unto him, Abraham, and he said, Behold, here I am. And he said, Take now thy son, thine only son Isaac, whom thou lovest, and get thee into the land of Moriah, and offer him there for a burnt offering upon one of the mountains which I will tell thee of. And Abraham rose up early in the morning and saddled his ass and took two of his young men with him, and Isaac his son, and clave the wood for the burnt offering, and rose up and went unto the place which God had told him. Then on the third day, Abraham lifted up his eyes and saw the place afar off. And Abraham said unto his young men, Abide ye here with the ass, and I and the lad will go yonder and worship and come again to you. And Abraham took the wood of the burnt offering and laid it upon Isaac his son. And he took the fire in his hand and a knife, and they went both of them together. And Isaac spake unto Abraham his father, and said, My father. And he said, Here am I, my son. And he said, Behold the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb for a burnt offering? And Abraham said, My son, God will provide himself a lamb for a burnt offering. So they went both of them together. And they came to the place which God hath told him of. And Abraham built an altar there, and laid the wood in order, and bound Isaac his son, and laid him on the altar upon the wood. And Abraham stretched forth his hand, and took the knife to slay his son. And the angel of the Lord called unto him out of heaven, and said, Abraham, Abraham, and he said, Here am I. And he said, Lay not thine hand upon the lad, neither do thou anything unto him. For now I know that thou fearest God, seeing thou hast not withheld thy son, thine only son, from me. And Abraham lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, behind him a ram caught in a thicket by his horns. And Abraham went and took the ram and offered him up for a burnt offering in the stead of his son. And Abraham called the name of the place Jehovah-Jireh, as it is said to this day, In the mount of the Lord it shall be seen. And the angel of the Lord called unto Abraham out of the heaven the second time, and said, By myself I have sworn, said the Lord, for because thou hast done this thing, and hast not withheld thy son, thine only son, that in blessing I will bless thee, and in multiplying I will multiply thy seed as the stars of the heaven, and as the sand which is upon the seashore. And thy seed shall possess the gate of his enemies. And in thy seed all the nations of the earth be blessed, because thou hast obeyed my voice. So here we can see that not only was Abraham willing to be obedient to the God of Israel and sacrifice his only son, but Isaac was also willing to go with Abraham and not question what was happening. Instead of, he could have said, wait, but there's no animal. I don't think I'm comfortable with this. You need to show me the animal before we get started because I'm not sure what's happening here. But I don't like where this is going. But he said, Dad, where's the animal? Dad said, the God of Israel will provide it for us. And he said, okay, and kept it pushing. So I think that not only here can we see the obedience of Abraham to the God of Israel and the relationship that they have and how the God of Israel blessed him, but we see the relationship that Abraham and Isaac had and how Isaac had that respect and that honor for his father to go with him and not question his intentions.
Yeah, it's true. I'm even gonna go a little step further and say, I think this is what. So, with regards to the relationship between Abraham and our father, or even Isaac and Abraham, I think this is a clear example of the difference between respect and honor. Because I'm going to use Bob, the guy down the street. If he told me to do something like this, absolutely not. And if my I just think that separates it completely, and I just think the respect, the honor that Abraham would have had to have in our father to even do such a thing. Now we say it all the time that he was going to sacrifice his son, his only son, but we actually need to break them words down even further and actually humanize the situation. He was going to sacrifice his only son,
right?
Because our father, tempted him. The words used in Genesis, right? He was going to sacrifice his only son. Now, I would pose the question to you guys. I may still pose it. And I used to ask this when I used to teach this years ago. And I used to always ask the same question. Because I don't know how I would feel if my father came to me and said to me, can I do it? I would cry. But I'm interested to see how you all sort of gauge how you guys would feel, what you guys would do in that situation.
I think it's a very hard question.
It's loaded. It's really hard. Yeah.
But I think it was so important for the God of Israel to do this, to have Abraham prove his uttermost obedience. I think even when we're talking about the phases that we say that we went through in our childhood of authoritarian for a very technically Abraham is like baby, the covenant is a baby. You know what I mean? The relationship is new, it's just starting. So there's that need for this. You need to not ask questions and be perfectly obedient. But to answer your question, I have no idea. I always say I hope that I'm able to be 100% obedient. My mom always says that when we were growing up, a lot of the things she did for us was because she knew that we weren't hers. We were the God of Israel's, that the God of Israel blessed her to raise and gave her the opportunity to do so. But she knew growing up that we would have our own relationship with the God of Israel, that we aren't at the core of it. We came from her flesh, but at the core of it, we aren't hers. And I think I've taken that with me, and I've learned what that really means as I've grown up. So I don't know if I ever came to a situation, hopefully I will be able to keep that in mind. I think it's a very important and profound thing to realize. But I don't know.
That's a solid answer.
I think also when you look at it, it does show Abraham's parenting, because Isaac understood, what I'm saying? It's the Israelite culture, the Israelite religion was really embedded into his parenting, because I feel you're being told, well, I don't know, he wasn't necessarily being told, but you're gonna get sacrificed, you're going up to sacrifice, you don't see any animals or anything, your thoughts are gonna be oh my gosh, what's gonna happen? But I feel when you have that Israel component in you, it gives you the spirit of understanding, so you understand what is right, okay, I'm supposed to do this. I understand that you're sacrificing a lot, but it's the spirit of understanding kind of goes over you, so you can.
It's true.
Yeah, I love how you mentioned that, Deborah, and how the culture must have been so ingrained in Isaac for him to even understand that this is just something that had to be done. and it wasn't something that had to be questioned.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for me, going back to Levi's question, I also have no idea what I would do, because the human side is such a huge thing. Like, we're humans, right? Like, we're human before we're Israel.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, I don't know. Like, if you told me to sacrifice my only son, and you're like, but why? Like, what does this have to do with the greater good? Please explain to me what's going to happen right after this, so I know.
Yeah.
Because, like, I think for me, it just, I would need, just me being the person I am, I would need some sort of explanation.
Yeah.
So I can wrap my head around why I need to kill my child. For whatever reasoning you
Yeah,
have.
no, I agree. I think, you know what, I think, go on, Deborah, did you want to make a point?
Oh no, I totally agree. Like, I would have to need like some type of reassurance to know, like, is everything gonna be okay after this? Like, because that's your child, you know, like, that's scary. Like, I would be crying. Yeah. I honestly would need a lot of like preparation to prepare for that.
100%.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, our father Abraham got no preparation because it was
None.
just from the start. But you know what? No, it's very good points you guys made. There's 2 points I want to touch on that came about. One was from Miriam. She just mentioned about humanizing the situation and not knowing what you would do. And I'm 100% in agreement with that answer, because I feel as though if we humanize the situation, I just think it's very hard to answer that question. And the reason why, it shouldn't be easy. In fact, let me reword it. It should not be an easy question to answer, because if it was, this wouldn't be an occurrence, or this wouldn't be something that we as Israelites look on as examples of obedience from Abraham to our father. This wouldn't, it just be an anything situation. It's not. It's something that we have to look into very deeply. And also, Naomi made a very good point about her mother mentioning about you said something along the lines of, you know, your mother knowing that you guys are not hers, but you're the God of Israel's, so on and so forth. And it's interesting you say that, right? Because if we break down the word parent, pair, whatever, rent, we don't own, or the parent doesn't own the children. Like that one, right? Okay, the parent doesn't
Fires
own.
in the chat. Fires in the chat.
Fires in the chat. But it's true, the parent doesn't own the child. In fact, the children are our fathers, hence the reason why they are offered up to our father. So that's a very, very, very important point that we need to mention. And if you do think like that in Abraham's situation, then maybe it will make the decision a lot easier. But we never know. Hopefully, we don't get put in a position like that, because that is chaos.
Yeah, I think even in Abraham's position, it's like 100 times more evident, because before he was Abraham, he was Abram, and it was Sarai. They couldn't have children. Like, they couldn't. They were old, they were barren, and they couldn't produce children. And the God of Israel gave them a son after changing their name and their path, right? Like, they gave them their son. So I think even in his case, it's like, it was very evident to him that this child, like, isn't mine, or isn't just ours, you know, like, it's like the God of Israel gave us. So I think even with a children and parent, I think we're talking about the back and forth, like that, the symbiotic. There's a symbiotic relationship between parent and child, with a parent has to take that authority and has to gain that respect, or have that like respect given to them. But it's also trust. Like, the Abraham, no matter what happened, trusted the God of Israel. Like, if you gave me this child, then I trust that you have a plan for me and this child. That you either will give me another one, or that this is mean something, like whatever that was, like whatever his rationale, like, or whether it's like, oh, I'm just going to obey, and I trust and have faith that you have a plan, that this is what you want, is this really, it exemplifies that trust that a child, especially a very young child, has for a parent as well, and how important that parent relationship has to be as well. So, yeah.
Right. I completely agree. I love all the points that everyone was making. Let's put some fires and some sevens in the chat, especially for what Levi said about the time of rent. I think that is literally so perfect.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, because it even goes back to Hannah and how she prayed for Samuel, and the God of Israel gave her that child, but she knew it wasn't hers. Like, she knew that at the end of the day, the only reason why she had that child was for the God of Israel. And then the God of Israel even blessed her after that by allowing her to have more children. So in things like that, you have to, when you talk to the God of Israel, when you have that communication with your parent, you need to also, as a child, follow up with what you say. Like, if you tell your parent you're going to do something, like, I'm going to do this for you, or I'm going to be act a certain way or whatever, you have to do that to build that trust between you and your parent. Because if your parent just sees you as someone who just has all these empty promises and whatever, then they're not going to trust your word. But once you have that understanding and that relationship between you and your parent, where your parent understands that if my child says that they're going to do something, I know they're going to do it.
Yeah.
And I think that goes back to even what you were saying, Naomi, about having that trusting relationship between a parent and a child and how important that is.
Yeah, I think that also works the other way. Like, that parent has to trust that
Yeah.
my parent says something, like, they're going to follow through. And there's one thing the God of Israel does is he follows through. Like,
Yeah, every time.
You're going to get 70 years of slavery. What do we get? 70 years of slavery, you know?
Right.
So there's that trust also, that with both rewards, punishments, with promises, that trust the child has in their parent that they're going to follow through no matter what it is.
And to touch on to like what everyone's saying, like something that my mom always says, like parents are like kind of like put on this earth to kind of like, it's like a test for like how you're going to be with the God of Israel. Like, he looks at how you know, respond to your parents, how you act with your parents, so he can see how your relationship is going to be with him. Yeah, I just think that really like correlates with like what you guys are saying.
Yeah, for sure. I completely agree with that. And I think that's something that's also really interesting, is how you can be raised by the same people, but turn out to be different individuals. Like me, from my sister to my brother, we are 3 different people. We were raised by, the same people, but us as humans, us as the way we interact with others, the way that we go about our lives, are in 3 completely different ways. And I think that we can even see that throughout the scriptures. So I want to look at Isaac and Rebekah and Jacob and Esau, and how they were 2 nations. They're twins, right? But it says in Genesis that 2 nations were within her womb. So I want to explore how different those 2 nations are, even though they're twins raised by the same people. So let's go to Genesis 27. Can I have a reader for this, please?
Okay, go for Naomi.
Okay. And Rebekah spake unto Jacob her son, saying, Behold, I heard thy father speak unto Esau thy brother, saying, Bring me venison, and make me savory meat, that I may eat, and bless thee before the Lord before my death. Now, therefore, my son, obey my voice according to that which I command thee. Go now to the flock and fetch me from thence 2 good kids of the goats, and I will make them savory meat for thy father, such as he loveth. And thou shalt bring it to thy father, and he may eat, and that he may bless thee before his death. And Jacob said to Rebekah his mother, Behold, Esau, my brother, is a hairy man, and I am a smooth man. My father peradventure will feel me, and I shall seem to him as a deceiver, and I shall bring a curse upon me, and not a blessing. And his mother said unto him, Upon me be thy curse, my son. Only obey my voice, and go fetch me then. And he went and fetched, and brought them to his mother. And his mother made savory meat, such as his father loved. And Rebekah took goodly raiment of her eldest son Esau, which were with her in the house, and put them upon Jacob her younger son. And she put the skins of the kids of the goats upon his hands, and upon the smooth of his neck. And she gave the savory meat and the bread which she had prepared into the hand of her son Jacob.
Now, Jacob had to be a very obedient child to go through with something like this. Like, imagine your mom putting the skin of an animal on you that she just killed like yesterday, put it on you so that you can go and trick your father, not even do a necessarily positive thing, but still follow the instructions of your parent. Jacob didn't question why she was doing it. He didn't question and say, "No, mom, I don't think I'm comfortable doing this." Rebecca gave him specific instructions, and he did exactly what he told her to do. And from then, we see that Jacob was able to obtain the blessing that was going to be given to Esau. And then another layer to this is Rebecca listening to the God of Israel, because this is all coming from him. When even before the twins were born, Rebecca knew that this was going to be the way things had to be. And she, instead of, saying, "You know what, I'm not comfortable doing this to my husband. I'm not comfortable pitting my sons against each other. I'm not going to do this." She said, "No, the God of Israel commanded me to do this thing, so I'm going to do this thing and see it through exactly the way he wanted me to do it."
It's true.
To touch on that, oh, sorry.
No, you go for it. Go first.
To touch on that, like, we do things, we listen to the God of Israel because there's a reason for everything. And I think it really does come down to, like, some people aren't always born with the spirit of truth. And I feel like it's also like the ultimate test with that. Because, like, families are different. Not everyone is in Israel, unfortunately. And those are going to be like tests in a way, I feel like, when it comes to parenting, or like, I feel like it was like a test that God was kind of like put out there. Like, even though this person's not doing right, you still have to follow through and adjust to those rules, being in Israel, to know what's right. And that's kind of what I see, like, because, you can come from the same parent, but end up different, you know what I'm saying? And I feel like that could also be a test in a way of like parenting. I feel like the God of Israel kind of did that in a way. Because, like, there's a reason for everything.
Right.
Yeah.
There's only a quick point I wanted to make, and it was with regards to that building of honor from Jacob to Rebecca, because where he says, "I'm going to seem like I'm a deceiver."
Yeah.
I think that's the word that's used. And his mother, and there will be a curse on me. And his mother's like, or Rebecca was like, no, the curse will be on me. It's the mother sheltering and taking care of Jacob, despite what, obviously, as we know, she knew, but it's that comfort that she's given to Jacob to sort of say, "Look, I'm here for you. If in the unlikely situation where someone will get cursed, I will take all the blame. I'll take all the heat." And I think that's where the honor is built. That's where the respect is built. That's where even the love is built, which I found really interesting in that scripture. It's just another 2 points.
Yeah, that's such a beautiful relationship that they must have had. And I think we can even, so the role of parents is one thing, but also the role of mother is also another, like, role of mother versus father. Because as we know, there are different roles of men and women in Israel and in the natural course of things. But I think we can even delve into the role of the mother, and she's definitely like going deep into her role here as both like the nurturer, the person that makes sure it's like the rules and structure is followed, that kind of puts things together and where they're supposed to be, like as a mother, like with her children. And I think even think of the human side of it, as Esau is the eldest son, there is probably a thought of, I'm taking this away from my eldest son. It's like a human mother, like the entire life is like thinking, "Oh, this is my eldest son, this is my younger son," but she's following kind of her instruction in doing so. And I think that's I think just that relationship is such a beautiful relationship to read and to study.
Yeah, for sure. And through this relationship between Rebecca, the God of Israel, Rebecca, and Jacob, you can see how each layer honors the one before, if that makes sense. So Rebecca, honors the God of Israel, and Jacob honors Rebecca through following through and making sure that, my parent may be doing this for a reason. And there could be a lot of times in our lives where our parents give us instruction and we're not really sure why or what this is going to have to do with the rest of our lives. we can look back on situations where that happens and be like, wow, I'm really happy that I listened to my parent in that situation, because I think I would have been in some deep stuff if I hadn't listened to them or heeded to their advice. So I think that they're both of those relationships are relationships that we can take from and apply to our own lives. Um, now I want to look at Esau and how different he was from his brother Jacob. Can I get a reader for this one?
I'll go if nobody else. Okay, it states, and Isaac called Jacob and blessed him, and charged him and said unto him, Thou shalt not take a wife of a daughter of Canaan, and arise, go to Padanaram, think about that, right, to the house of Bethuel, thy mother's father, and take thee a wife from thence of the daughters of Laban thy mother's brother. And God Almighty blessed. And God Almighty bless thee, and make thee fruitful, and multiply thee, that thou mayest be a multitude of people, and give thee the blessing of Abraham to thee and to thy seed with thee, that thou mayest inherit the land wherein thou art a stranger, which God gave unto Abraham. And Isaac sent away Jacob, and he went to Padanaram unto Laban, son of Bethuel the Syrian, the brother of Rebekah, Jacob's and Esau's mother. When Esau saw that Isaac had blessed Jacob and sent him to Padanaram to take him a wife from thence, and that he had blessed him and gave him he gave him a charge, saying, Thou shalt not take a wife of the daughters of Canaan. And that Jacob obeyed his father and his mother, and was gone to Padanaram. And Esau, seeing that the daughters of Canaan pleased not Isaac his father, then went Esau unto Ishmael, and took unto the wives which he had Mahalath, the daughter of Ishmael, Abraham's son, the sister of Nabajoth, to be his wife.
So here we see that Esau deliberately, like, he saw what Isaac had told Jacob and said, just because he wants my brother to do this thing, I'm going to do the exact opposite. I'm not gonna, heed the instruction of my father, and instead I'm just gonna do what I want to do. That may be because he was bitter, and maybe because he just did not care. And I think it's just really interesting to see how they had the same parents, but they had different relationships with their parents. Like in the scripture, it says that Jacob and Rebekah were closer, and Esau and Isaac were closer. And we see how maybe Esau was upset with his father for giving Jacob the blessing. And said, you know what, I'm going to go against my dad and I'm going to do my own thing, because obviously, like, no one cares, like nobody cares about me kind of thing. So I'm going to do my own thing since no one seems to care or have a problem with what I do anyway.
It's true.
And I think,
go for it.
Go ahead.
No, you go. Go on.
I was just saying that I think even when we're talking about the different ways that two children can grow up with the same exact parents, talking nature versus nurture, you can't get as similar as siblings or twins, or like same, very similar genetic makeup, very similar environment and nurture from the parents. But I think even that speaks to whether it's a good thing, whether in a good way or a bad way, parents do treat their children differently. And so I think in a lot of ways, like I know my parents always, like, there were moments where I'm like, why is my brother or sister being treated this way, different than what I'm being treated? And I didn't understand that. But there is a different way that kids need to be treated in order to fulfill whatever they're supposed to fulfill. And so I definitely saw that. My parents have like 4 children, and we all got different, if we're talking about styles of parenting, the different styles of parenting, authoritative, authoritarian, and even the other ones, helicopter, were with each of their children at different stages in different ways. So I might see my parents be very helicopter with me, but very authoritative with like my sister at some different points of our life. But taking a step back, we know that that's probably necessary in that moment. But it does speak to the different ways that two, especially if you think about twins, like the nature versus nurture, the whole very similar environment, that can kind of go the impact that that parenting style, the parenting relationship has on that child.
It's true. That's a good point you made, actually. And I think, as you said, it's very dependent on what the child requires and I guess their personality traits. That I can definitely relate in the sense that I'd say, for example, with me, my parents were a lot more on the authoritative, I believe. That's the more laid back approach, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Definitely like that with me. But I say with the brother below me, it was the opposite because of his personality traits, because he used to be a really troublesome guy in school. So it was definitely the opposite. And I feel like it's obviously, it's like back, forth. And it's the same with the youngest brother now. And I think, again, it's similar here with Jacob and Esau. I think it's very dependent on their personality traits, and similar to your situation, Naomi. Very dependent on personality traits, on how our parents, or how parents in general, approach, being a parent. And I think that's a very, very interesting point you made.
Right. And I think
Oh,
go ahead, Deborah.
yeah, just like the different traits and how a child can be punished or taught in different ways as being a parent and being a child. When you have siblings, you have different interests than your siblings. So depending on their interests, your parents might be like, oh, well, you did bad, I'm going to take away this doll, or you did bad, you're not going to go to the concert today. Just different things that, they do based off the type of person that you are, because we're different. I think that's like interesting to touch on.
Yeah.
And I think something that's really important to keep in mind when parenting is understanding that if you have multiple children, that they are each going to be different people.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you can't raise them all as the same person, because that's just not going to end up well. So parenting is also understanding who each of your children are and parenting them in the way that they need to be parented. Of course, like we have mentioned before, you still have that baseline of understanding the culture, understanding the customs and things like that. But when it really comes to discipline and shaping the person's personality and understanding and having a relationship with them, it's really about learning your child, understanding what works and what doesn't work, and then use that to your advantage. And also, show your children that they're all different. Don't put them under the same umbrella and group them under the same things, because then, they may end up resenting you or even resenting their siblings, because they're like, oh, I'm not as good as my sibling at doing this certain thing, but my parents put us both in the same things because it was just easier that way. But I think it's important to understand and recognize like the likes and dislikes, who your child is, who your child isn't, when it comes to parenting and being a good parent.
Yeah, I definitely think that's the case. I think my sister and I are kind of a good case of that because we're twins. And so a lot of things we've had to share that my brothers did not have to share. And just because we were seen as like one person. But I think, I think again, because my parents' authoritative style allow us to have that open communication about how we like feel about that. But I think even with that twin case, but also with children in general, it is that parent's duty and responsibility to learn that child and treat that child as a human being and not as like a placeholder until they eventually become like even like an adult. Like if a child has their own feelings, even from the little age, their own personalities, and so I think that's super important to do that.
Right, for sure. And something that I've learned even observing children is, like Levi had mentioned earlier, children are sponges. So whatever you do, whatever you say, they're going to retain and try to bring into their own lives, their own relationships. So it's important to, watch what you say and watch what you do. but also, not try to put your children in a box, and stop them from exploring who they are, within Israel, exploring who they are within their own relationships, exploring who they are when it comes to their careers, things that they want to do. Like, it's important to have that hold over your child to make sure, like, okay, I don't want you to do anything stupid, or I don't want you to like hurt yourself, but also giving them that free reign and allowing them to figure out who they are, without you like being over them, telling them, no, you're this person, or no, you're that person.
I think that actually brings to another point where I remember I saw this thing. I think it was a study, or maybe it was just a look into parenting styles or behaviors. There was this thing I saw, this article I read, where it was something about how parents shouldn't talk in baby talk to their children. They should actually talk normal, like how an adult talks, because that affects their speech development. Like as they're supposed to be able to say a certain amount of words and sounds at a certain age. And speaking in like baby talk, I'm not gonna exemplify it for you guys today, but it's like baby talk where you're like kind of a muffled, kind of a childish way of speaking. And so that just speaks even more to that influence that a parent had, that it's not as explicit as others, but it's that environment that you put around your child that influences like their development and the people that they become.
Right, for sure. I completely agree. I wanted to bring up one last scripture just about how not only can the parents' actions have an effect on their children, but how the children's actions can have effects on their parents. So I'm going to go to 1 Samuel 2. Okay. Now Eli was very old, and heard all that his sons did unto all Israel, and how they lay with the women that assembled at the door of the tabernacle of the congregation. And he said unto them, why do ye do such things? For I hear of your evil dealings by all these people. Nay, my sons, for it is no good report that I hear. Ye make the Lord's people to transgress. If one man sin against another, the judge shall judge him. But if a man sin against the Lord, who shall entreat for him? Notwithstanding, they hearkened not unto the voice of their father, because the Lord would slay them. And the child Samuel grew on and was in favor both with the Lord and also with men. And there came a man of God unto Eli and said unto him, thus saith the Lord, did I plainly the house of thy father when they were in Egypt in the Pharaoh's house? And did I choose him out of all the tribes of Israel to be my priest, to offer upon mine altar, to burn incense, to wear an ephod before me? And did I give unto the house of thy father all the offerings made by fire of the children of Israel? Wherefore kick ye at my sacrifice and at mine offering, which I have commanded in my habitation, and honorest thy sons above me, to make yourselves fat with the chiefest of all the offerings of Israel my people. Wherefore the Lord God of Israel saith, I said indeed that thy house and the house of thy father should walk before me forever. But now the Lord saith, be it far from me, for them that honor me I will honor, and they that despise me shall be lightly esteemed. Behold, the days come that I will cut off thine arm and the arm of thy father's house, that there shall not be an old man in thine house. And thou shalt see an enemy in my habitation, and all the wealth of which God shall give Israel. And there shall not be an old man in thy house forever. And the man of thine, whom I shall not cut off from my altar, shall be to consume thine eyes and to grieve thine heart, and all the increase of thine house shall die in the flower of their age. And this shall be a sign unto thee, that shall come upon thy two sons, on Hophni and Phinehas. In one day they shall die both of them. And I will raise me up a faithful priest that shall do according to that which is in mine heart and mine mind. And I will build him a sure house, and he shall walk before mine anointed forever. So here we see the God of Israel plainly says, those that honor me, I will honor them. And if you don't honor me, well, then go somewhere else and do something else because I don't have time for you. And here we can see that the sins of Hophni and Phinehas fell on their father and every other person after them in their house, that there shall not be an old man in thine house. So they're not allowed to go in their house to have a good life, a plentiful life, because of the sins that they committed against the God of Israel, and how that reflected the kind of father that they had. Because I guess it was the God of Israel or someone representing the God of Israel had came to Eli and said, look at what your sons are doing. Like, this is what your sons are doing, and they're not honoring the God of Israel. They're doing everything against the God of Israel and everything against Israel. Like, you need to get some control over your sons. But he couldn't do that. And eventually, the whole house was condemned because of their actions. So you can see here how by not only heeding the instructions of the God of Israel or your earthly father, your earthly parents, that can fall upon your parents and the generations after you.
I think definitely. I think that if it ever proves that notion of that parent saying, "Don't shame me, let me go out in public," because there is this is an extreme situation.
Right.
Like, there's death involved here. The thing also, I was saying, I think it would be interesting thing to kind of talk about because you see that the child's sins went backwards, like against the father and against even forwards, like the future of that household. But I almost wonder if, because I said in the beginning that I think that if a child grows up and doesn't have those law, statutes, commandments in their hearts and their mind, their spirit, then the parent has done something that is wrong, like they have failed in a certain way.
Right.
And I wonder if that is less that child is doing something wrong and more that parent didn't instill those things in their child. And, that brings us back to nature versus nurture. And, parents can't always predict certain things about their child. So there's can be discussion to be had there. But it's very interesting, that connection of generation into generation, and how the act, because we are one as a family, that the action of one can affect the actions of many. And so the sins of one can, punish many. And so I think that just reads into that. But I just wonder that relationship and how he raised up his children to allow them to kind of become the children, the adults that they had become.
I think I don't know. I agree. And I also think I think that those scriptures specifically, it's easy to sort of pinpoint what type of parenting style Eli would have had with his two sons. I can't remember the name of it specifically, but there was one that referenced that was described as not wanting to be the villain. I think you said, and not wanting to. What's it? I thought it's not positive parenting.
That's permissive parenting.
There you go. So that's what I would tie to him personally. I feel as though he would have told them what, like, distinguish right and wrong, but maybe not enough. Maybe they lack discipline, because there's no way a priest's son or priest's sons are thinking that is acceptable. So maybe he did lack that side of the parenting thing, and therefore you could sort of attach, would you say permissive?
Yeah.
Permissive parenting to him. And just to add to Naomi's point, it is literally a clear example of don't shame me. He's not shaming me. But it's true.
I think it also speaks. I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
This also speaks to, because this is Eli. Like, I'm sure he wasn't a terrible person, or he followed God of his instructions, but I think this also speaks to, like, if we're talking about his parenting style, maybe it's not just showing, like, it's not just showing or being an example. Like, that is the basic, like, that's what the child needs, but it's also telling and explaining and teaching and making sure that child knows explicitly, like the God of Israel did to us, what is right and what is wrong, what that punishment is, what the reward will be. And I wonder if that's kind of where he failed, because this is Eli. Like, he's not like some wayward person. He is, and so I don't know. I wonder if that's kind of where that came, because parenting is a lot about show and tell,
Yeah.
exemplify and teach and all of that. So, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know, because it's like it even said in the scriptures that Eli went to his sons and tried to talk to them about it, but by that point, the deeds were already done. Like
Yeah.
everything had already happened, so it was too late. So it
Mhm.
just gets you thinking, like, was that neglectful parenting? Was him being a priest taking up too much of his time to be a parent?
Yeah.
What kind of people, like, who were they around growing up? What kind of people did Eli have that had an influence on them and the kind of person that those kind of people that they became? Those are all kind of things that we have to think about when you think about parenting. Like, not only worrying about the influence that you have over your children, but the people around you. Like, how do your children see them? And what kind of influence do they have over your children?
That's a good point, that what you guys are all saying. It really does come down to parenting, but also the environment that your child is around. Because like you said, we don't really know exactly what Eli was doing as a parent. He could have been neglectful. And sometimes when parents are like that, children often look towards other people to bounce off of and take things and pick up things from. And that can cause a bad effect for them in the future. I think you guys touched on it before, that children are sponges, they soak in things. And something I always remember, that like my parents, I'm sure Israelite parents, Israelite kids can relate, but like when you have a favorite show and there's like a Christmas episode or a Halloween episode, they like turn that off, because as a child you're so easily influenced by stuff, and that can also like be a bad effect for you in the future when you get older. Oh, my parents let me watch Christmas movies when I was younger. That I didn't do it, but I can still watch it. It's not gonna be okay for you.
Yeah, for sure. I think that that's a great kind of a great way to look at it. Like, our parents did things for a reason and told us no for a reason, and we have to look at that and say, okay, I now, like, being older, I understand like why they had said no to me doing certain things and why they said yes to me doing other things. And just understand that everything that they did, they had my best interests in mind, and they weren't doing things selfishly. They were thinking about me and my future when they were telling me what to do, what not to do, how to act, how not to act. So I think that it's definitely important for us to have patience with our parents, and to understand that they're also human as well, and they're going to do things that we may agree with or may not agree with. Um, but I have loved this discussion. We are at the end of the discussion here, but I think that all of the points that were made were amazing points, and points that I hope that everyone in the audience really listened to, and could even maybe apply to their own lives. I hope that all of you put your own experiences in the chat, so that we could all have a discussion about how the way our parents raised us affected who we are today and the people that we became. Can I get some closing remarks from my wonderful panel that's been with me all this time?
Um,
Oh.
no, Deborah, please, please go.
I would say one thing that I picked up from this lesson is just like, like the environment and what you show to your children when they're young. It always happens when they're young, is how they're going to be a result of when they're older. And that's why I love our culture so much, our religion so much, because we have cultural things that we can put in for the children so that they can grow up and pass it down to their children as well. Like whether it's helping making the bread for Passover or New Moon, or um, decorating the homes for New Year's or a bib, like things like that. Purim is a good example for it too. Like having that culture embedded in as a child is going to be really important to grow an strong Israelite child in the future.
For sure.
Definitely agree. I think as I'm not close, hopefully, depending on God was just planned for me, not close to having a child, but as I'm thinking about maybe older people that are having children, or even like my own parents, I do think that the Bible, if you think about it as a parent-child relationship, is a good parenting book. And I just think that, and I really commend parents for the responsibility that they have, because I can tell it's really hard. And just a shout out to my parents for being great parents, to raising great children, if I do say so myself.
Yeah, that was a nice message. A very nice message. I'm going to shout out my parents as well. But also, I think it's super important to remember, not only are we teaching this as like I guess a life lesson or something that we need to adopt into our lifestyles or into our ways of living, but we also as Israelites need to remember that this is actually a commandment, and it's therefore a necessity, or amongst the necessities or amongst the rules in which we have to follow in order to be the sanctified ones or the children of the Most High. So this isn't up for discussion. This isn't a debate. You must actually honor your mother and your father the same way you would honor the rest of the commandments. So shout out my parents as well.
Shout out to parents.
Shout out all the parents in the nation. How about that one?
Yeah, parents. Well, I want to thank you, Naomi, Deborah, and Levi, for joining me tonight. I really, really, really enjoyed the conversation that we had. I wish we could go on for a longer time, but we can't. So thank you to all the viewers for joining and for putting all the sevens in the chats and for just being part of the discussion as well. Make sure you tune back in next Friday at 7:30 for the next Friday night Bible study, and also every Saturday at 2 p.m. for our Saturday afternoon lessons. Peace, everyone.
Peace.
Peace.